She thought it was just another routine stop, until the officers' tones changed. Their questions grew sharper, and the night took a dangerous turn. But when she handed them the phone, everything flipped in an instant. Watch till the end to see how justice unfolds. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The cold night air wrapped around her like a warning. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, 72 years old, walked slowly down the cracked sidewalk, her cane tapping lightly against the concrete. The street was dimly lit, a few flickering streetlights casting long shadows. She had just left the corner store, a small bag of groceries hanging from her frail fingers. Behind her, the low hum of an engine rumbled. A police cruiser crept up, headlights off, rolling slow, too slow. Evelyn sighed. She had lived in this neighborhood for decades, had seen it change, watched the faces come and go. But one thing had remained the same, how they looked at her, like she didn't belong, like she was a problem to be dealt with. The sharp sound of a car door swinging open shattered the silence. "Ma'am, hold up right there." Evelyn stopped. She didn't turn. She just closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling softly. Then, steadying herself, she turned around. Two officers stood under the weak glow of a streetlight. One was young, tall, his hand resting on his holstered gun. The other, older, had a smirk that made Evelyn's stomach turn. "Got ID on you?" the older cop asked. She lifted an eyebrow. "Why?" "You fit the description," he said. Evelyn's heart pounded, but her face remained still. She had heard those words before. "Description of what?" she asked. "A suspect," the younger cop said. He shifted on his feet, glancing at his partner, as if unsure. Evelyn tilted her head. "A suspect? Wearing a Sunday hat? Walking with a cane? Carrying a bag of groceries?" The older cop took a step closer. "We don't need attitude, lady. Just show your ID." Evelyn let out a slow breath. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her cane. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice calm but firm. The older cop chuckled. "That's so?" Evelyn nodded. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. "I think you should talk to him," she said simply, tapping the screen and holding it out. The younger cop frowned. "Who's that?" The moment the voice on the other end spoke, the smirk vanished from the older officer's face. The color drained from his cheeks. Everything changed in an instant. The night air thickened with tension as the officer stared at the phone in Evelyn's hand. The voice on the other end was calm, yet commanding, each word sharp enough to slice through the silence. "This is Attorney Marcus Graves." "Who am I speaking to?" The older officer's jaw clenched. His posture stiffened, his once cocky smirk vanishing. The younger cop, clearly less experienced, hesitated, his fingers twitching near his utility belt. Evelyn held the phone steady, her sharp eyes locked onto the officers. She had been through enough in her life to recognize the shift, the sudden realization that they had messed with the wrong person. "Who am I speaking to?" the voice on the phone repeated. The older officer cleared his throat. This is Officer Reynolds with the—" "I don't need your department name," the voice interrupted. "I need your badge numbers." The younger cop flinched. Reynolds shot him a glare before looking back at Evelyn. He hesitated. "Badge numbers," the voice pressed. "Or I can have this call rerouted to internal affairs. Your choice." Evelyn didn't move, didn't blink. She knew men like Reynolds, bullies in uniform, abusing their authority until they found themselves cornered. Reynolds sighed sharply, rattling off his badge number, his voice tight. The younger cop followed, his voice barely above a mumble. "Good," the attorney said. "Now, I'd like to know why you've detained my client." Reynolds scoffed. "She's not detained." "Then she's free to go?" The cop's nostrils flared. He looked at Evelyn with a look that said he wanted to argue, wanted to hold on to whatever power he thought he had left. But he hesitated too long. "Yes," he finally muttered. "She's free to go." Evelyn didn't move. She just held the phone a little closer to her ear. "You still there, Marcus?" "I'm here," the attorney replied. Mrs. Carter, are you okay? Evelyn's lips curled into a knowing smile. I'm fine, baby. That one word, baby, made Reynolds' expression twist in confusion. His eyes darted between her and the phone, putting pieces together that he should have considered before harassing an elderly woman on the street. Evelyn nodded, her voice steady. I'll see you soon. Keep the phone on until you're inside, Marcus instructed. Call me when you get home. I will, sweetheart, she said. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. When she looked up, she saw it, the flicker of recognition in Reynolds' eyes. The name had finally clicked. You? His voice trailed off. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. Something wrong, officer? Reynolds clenched his jaw, but he didn't answer. The younger cop looked uneasy, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Evelyn took a step forward, her cane tapping against the pavement. You might want to go check your department records, she said softly. See who filed that lawsuit against the city last year. The one you all tried to bury. Reynolds' face darkened. Evelyn gave him one last look before turning away. As she walked down the sidewalk, she heard the younger officer whisper, "Who the hell is she?" Reynolds didn't answer, but Evelyn knew the moment he figured it out. Because behind her, the silence stretched long and heavy, and when she finally reached her house and locked the door behind her, she smiled. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Yes, I'm staying on topic. The story follows an elderly black woman, Evelyn Carter, who is harassed by police officers until she hands them the phone, revealing a powerful connection that changes everything. The suspense is building, and the next part will deepen the tension and consequences of the officer's actions. Now here's part 3. Evelyn sat in her dimly lit living room, the weight of the night pressing against her shoulders. The phone rested in her lap, still warm from the call with Marcus. She knew this wasn't over, and she was right. A sharp knock rattled her front door. Not urgent but forceful. She exhaled, pushing herself up with her cane. Her fingers grazed the curtain, and through the narrow gap, she saw a patrol car idling across the street. Another knock. She unlocked the door but didn't open it fully. Standing on her porch was the younger officer from earlier, his posture tense, hands stiff at his sides. "Ma'am," he said, glancing behind him as if making sure no one was watching. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Didn't get enough the first time? The officer shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't like Reynolds. She could see it in his eyes, uncertainty, maybe even regret. I just wanted to say," he exhaled. "That wasn't right. What happened?" Evelyn studied him. "And," he hesitated, glancing at the street again. "I didn't know who you were." Evelyn let out a quiet chuckle. "That's the problem, isn't it? You only second-guess yourself when you realize someone's connected. But what if I wasn't?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Evelyn stepped forward, her eyes sharp. "If I were just another old black woman on the street, you would have let Reynolds push me around. Maybe worse." The officer's face tightened. "I wasn't going to let it go that far." She held his gaze. "But you weren't going to stop it, either." Silence. He had no argument for that. I don't know what to do," he admitted quietly. Evelyn's expression softened just a little. She had seen this before, good men, weak spines. "You know exactly what to do. You're just afraid of the cost." He looked away. "Reynolds, he's been on the force for years. If I speak up," Evelyn nodded knowingly, "you think they'll turn on you." He didn't answer, but she could see it in his face. She sighed. "Son, let me tell you something. The cost of silence is always greater than the cost of speaking up. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it always comes due." The officer shifted, conflicted. But before he could respond, another car pulled up. This one wasn't a patrol car. It was sleek, black, and deliberate. Evelyn smiled. "And I think that cost is about to come knocking on your department's door." The young officer turned as Marcus Graves stepped out of the car, his suit sharp, his eyes colder than the night air. "Let's talk," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of what was about to unfold. And just like that, everything shifted again. The young officer swallowed hard as Marcus Graves approached, his polished shoes tapping against the concrete with quiet authority. The tension in the air thickened. Evelyn stepped back, letting the moment unfold exactly as she knew it would. Marcus barely glanced at the officer before turning his attention to Evelyn. "You okay?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with something colder. Evelyn nodded. "I'm fine, baby. But I think this young man here has something on his mind." The officer stiffened. His eyes darted toward the black car, then back to Marcus. I didn't come here to cause trouble," he said quickly. Marcus tilted his head. "Trouble? You're worried about trouble?" He let out a dry chuckle. "Let me explain something to you, officer." He paused, waiting. "Dawson," the officer mumbled. "Officer Dawson," Marcus repeated, his tone sharp. "Trouble is what your partner started tonight. Harassing an elderly woman. Racial profiling. Violation of civil rights. And that's just the beginning." Dawson's face paled. "I didn't." "You didn't stop it," Marcus cut in. "Which makes you complicit." Dawson's mouth opened, but no words came out. Evelyn watched, knowing this was the moment. The crossroads where men like him either found their backbone or lost themselves completely. "I want to do the right thing," Dawson finally said. "But Reynolds, the department, they protect their own." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make Dawson lean in. "Let me tell you something about protection," he said. "Right now, that badge on your chest is a shield. But the moment Reynolds realizes he's in trouble, that shield disappears. You'll go down with him." Dawson swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" Marcus folded his arms. "Tell the truth." Dawson hesitated. "And if I do?" Marcus smirked, but it wasn't friendly. "Then you might just get to keep your career." The silence stretched between them. Evelyn could see the war behind Dawson's eyes. The fear, the doubt, but also the glimmer of something else, something stronger. Dawson nodded, almost to himself. Then finally he spoke. "Okay." Marcus pulled out his phone. "Good. Because this is just getting started." The night wasn't over. But for the first time, Evelyn knew justice wasn't just a distant hope. It was coming. No, I'm still on topic. The story is staying focused on Evelyn, the police harassment, and the fallout after she handed over the phone. But I see what you mean. You want the final part to keep the suspense tight and resolve the confrontation directly. Here's the final part. The silence on Evelyn's porch was thick as Marcus tucked his phone away, his eyes never leaving Officer Dawson. "You're sure about this?" Dawson asked, his voice low. Marcus nodded. "You either stand for something now, or you let this eat at you for the rest of your life." Dawson inhaled deeply, then exhaled through his nose. He gave a single, firm nod. "Okay." Before another word could be spoken, flashing blue and red lights filled the street. A second patrol car screeched to a stop in front of Evelyn's house. Reynolds. He climbed out, moving with the arrogance of a man who had gotten away with too much for too long. His jaw was set, his fingers flexing at his sides. His eyes landed on Dawson first, then flicked to Marcus and finally to Evelyn. "What the hell are you doing here?" Reynolds barked, stepping forward. Evelyn didn't flinch. She folded her arms, watching him the way a seasoned gambler watches a man about to lose his last chip. Marcus stepped between them. "I'd choose your next words carefully, officer." Reynolds let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, this is cute. You think filing a complaint is gonna scare me? I got friends, Graves. People who don't like troublemakers sticking their nose where it don't belong." Dawson took a step forward. "Reynolds, stop." Reynolds turned on him, disbelief flashing in his eyes. You're siding with them?" Dawson squared his shoulders. "I'm siding with the truth." A muscle in Reynolds' jaw twitched. Then, without warning, his hand moved toward his belt, toward his weapon. Evelyn's heart skipped. But before he could even touch the holster, "Don't." The single word cut through the night like a bullet. Marcus hadn't moved, but the look in his eyes made Reynolds hesitate. Sirens sounded again. More cars. More officers. But these weren't Reynolds' friends. A man in a crisp suit stepped out of an unmarked black sedan. His presence alone silenced everything. "Officer Reynolds," the man said, his voice calm but final. "You're under investigation. Step away from your weapon." Reynolds' face drained of color. He looked at Evelyn, then at Marcus, and finally at Dawson. "You did this," he seethed. Dawson nodded once. "Yeah, I did." And just like that, it was over. As Reynolds was led away, Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Marcus turned to her. "You all right?" She smiled. "I am now." The night had started with injustice, but it ended with something stronger. Justice. And the fight was only beginning.